CD2 Track 1 Section 3 You will hear 3 students discussing exam techniques with their tutor. First, in the exam, you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 1 to 4. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Morning, everyone. I thought we'd get together today and just talk about exam techniques. I'm sure everyone has different ideas about them. So, shall we find out what you do first when you get into an exam?
Check that you have the right exam paper?
It sounds funny, but students do actually answer the wrong exam paper sometimes. So check that it's your exam first. Then what?
Write your examination number on the answer sheet?
Well, it might sound obvious, but writing your examination number at the beginning of the exam can be a good idea. Apart from making sure the examiner knows who wrote the exam, can anyone say why?
It can help you relax?
Yes, that's right. Doing something easy like that gives you a chance to calm down. Right, so what do you do next?
Read the questions carefully?
Well, before you read the questions, what should you do?
Read the instructions.
Yes, you should read the instructions next. You need to know how many questions you have to answer and whether you have to answer all the questions or only some. What other important information do you need to check before you start?
How much time you have?
Yes, Jerry's right. You need to make sure that you know how long the exam is so you can manage your time properly.
Before you hear the next part of the conversation, in the exam, you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 5 to 8. Track 2 Listen and answer questions 5 to 8.
OK, what do you do next?
Read the questions?
Yes, it's very important to read the questions, not just once, but several times.
I usually make a few notes when I'm looking at the questions. Sometimes a question looks easy, and then when you start writing, you realize that it's actually more difficult than you thought.
Yeah, but you don't want to spend too much time writing notes.
No, but it's a good idea to jot down a few ideas to see if you can remember the arguments for the topics you studied most.
Once we've decided, is it better just to start at the beginning and answer the questions as they appear on the exam, or should we start with the easy questions?
Well, I start with the questions that I know better and leave the ones I'm not sure of for the end.
That's what I do, but I still keep an eye on the clock, especially when the questions are all worth the same number of marks. Before you hear the rest of the conversation, in the exam you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 9 and 10. Track 3 Listen and answer questions 9 and 10.
Mac's right. If you write one very good answer, but it's only worth 30% of the marks, you still lose the other 70% on that exam.
So it's better to write our main ideas for a question, even if we don't have time to answer it properly.
Yes, absolutely. We can't give you marks for writing nothing. But if you give us your main ideas, we can give you some marks.
Oh, really? I wish I'd known that in my last exam. I spent all my time writing a long answer to one of the questions and didn't get round to the other 2. I didn't understand why I got such a low mark.
Yeah, that's what happened to me. Luckily, my tutor explained it afterwards, so I never did that again. That is the end of section 3. In the exam, you will have half a minute to check your answers. Track 4 1.
I bought this shirt in a sale.
2.
My brother thinks online shopping is much quicker than going to the shops.
3.
The good thing about shopping in a department store is that you can get everything in one place.
4.
The last time I took something back to a shop, the customer services manager wasn't there.
5.
I lost my credit card the other day. I was really worried someone else would use it.
6.
Have you ever bought a train ticket with a student discount? It's so much cheaper.
Track 5.
Could you tell me something about who does the shopping in your family?
Of course. Well, in a way, it depends on what kind of shopping you mean. There are 4 people in my family, but only 2 of us actually go shopping. I think we're like most families, really. I mean, my mother always buys the food. She's very organised. You know, she always makes a shopping list before she goes out. She says it's a good way to save money. Anyway, she goes to the supermarket once a week and gets everything we need. My father and brother hardly ever go to the shops, but I love shopping. I'm the person in our family who goes shopping the most. I just love to go to the shopping mall with my friends. Sometimes I buy clothes on the spur of the moment, you know, without planning to. But quite often when I get home, I don't really like what I've bought and I have to go back and ask for a refund. I don't like doing that very much. I think it's a bit embarrassing.
Track 6. Hi. This is our last lecture about business and advertising this term, and today I'm going to talk about shopping habits in different parts of the world. First, we'll look at who normally does the shopping. Yes, well, in the United Kingdom, about 75% of the food shopping is done by women. But this isn't the case everywhere. There are countries where up to 60% of men do the grocery shopping on their way back from work. And habits are changing, even in Western countries. For example, a recent survey showed that in the United States, nearly 50% of men shop for groceries. Now, let's look at where people shop. In fact, where people shop depends on whether they live in the city or in the country. As we all know, there are more supermarkets in the city and more markets and small shops in the country. So, as the population moves to the city to find work, more people are shopping in supermarkets than ever before. Track 7.
Hello, good to see you all here. This afternoon, I'm going to talk about a recent survey into men's and women's shopping habits. Before I start, I'd like you to look at the list of statements about men and women and see which ones you would expect to be true. Right? Firstly, let's look at the idea that women spend a lot of money on expensive shoes. Actually, this isn't true. In fact, women buy a lot of cheap shoes. Men, on the other hand, try to save money by buying special offers. What is surprising about women, though, is that they like shopping in expensive or exclusive boutiques. And it isn't true that they always make a shopping list when they go to the supermarket. We also expected to find that men would go to the supermarket after midnight to get their food cheaper, but this wasn't the case either. Then the third thing we learnt about women is that they like to shop in big department stores, which men don't like. They like to go shopping in specialist shops. Okay, how many did you get right?
Track 8. Section 4. You will hear the introduction to a lecture on consumer habits. First, in the exam, you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 1 to 4. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Good evening, everyone. This evening, I'm going to continue last week's lecture by talking more about how people spend their money. First of all, I'm going to compare how people of different age groups spend their cash. You probably know that there's a lot of difference between what young people do with their money, how families spend their money, and what more mature people do. Secondly, I want us to think about what we imagine men and women spend their money on. And then I'm going to look at male and female spending patterns and see whether we were right. OK, to start with, let's divide the population into 3 sections. Let's say young people up to the age of 30 in the first group. Then let's put families in the 30 to 55-year-old group. So that puts adults over 55 in the mature group. Does that make sense?
Before you hear the next part of the lecture, in the exam, you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 5 to 7. Track 9. Listen and answer questions 5 to 7.
Right, well, I found that the first group, that's young people up to the age of 30, mostly spend their money on clothes, music and entertainment. That's not really very surprising, is it? Although I must admit, I thought they might spend a lot on cars and travelling around. So, the next group is what I've called families, people in the age group from 30 to 55. Naturally, as I expected, this group spends most of its money on food, toys and trips out. But I was surprised to find that people aged between 30 and 55 spend most of their money on furniture and kitchen equipment. I suppose it's logical if you think about it. People are usually improving their homes at that age, and household equipment is very expensive. But they also spend a lot of money on electronic equipment, like video games for the children. Now turning to the third group, that's people over 55. I thought they'd spend their money on gardening tools and electronic equipment, but I was wrong again. People in the over 55s group spend most money on new cars and days out.
Before you hear the rest of the lecture, in the exam you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 8 to 10. Track 10. Listen carefully and answer questions 8 to 10.
So, what did we think about how men and women spend their money? OK, well, we thought that young women would spend a lot on clothes and shoes, and that young men would buy more electronic equipment and cars. Well, when we look at the figures, we can see that we were right about the men. Young men spend twice as much as women on cars and computers. But, and this is interesting, we were wrong about the women. I was surprised to find that young women spend much more on beauty treatments than they do on clothes and shoes. So we'll have to think about that again. And there's another interesting fact about young women. It looks as though young women are much more concerned about their diet than men. We found that although young women don't spend as much as men on eating out, they do spend a lot more on organic foods than young men.
That is the end of section 4. In the exam, you will have half a minute to check your answers. Track 11. A.
Hi, Trudy. What are you doing this weekend? I'm going swimming down at the beach.
Oh, right. I'm going running. I'm practicing for the marathon next month. Do you like running, Carl?
No, not me.
B.
Hey, Carl, do you feel like going to the cinema tonight? There's a really good film on.
Oh, I'm sorry, Hilary. I've already got tickets to go to a concert this evening.
C.
What are you doing this vacation, John? I'm travelling around Europe for a while before I go back to Australia.
Oh, really? I'm not that keen on travelling, to be honest. I'm going to spend my vacation gardening. D.
I'm going cycling on Saturday, Hilary. Do you want to come along?
Thanks a lot, but I've got a lot of cooking to do for the party in the evening. I hope you're still coming.
Of course I am. Wouldn't miss it.
Track 12. 1. Fry. Fry. 2. Pray. Pray. 3. lead, lead. 4. Blade, blade. 5. Correct, correct. 6. Play, play. 7. Read, read. 8. Fly, fly. 9. Played, played. 10. Collect, collect. Track 13. So, Sally, what do you do in your free time?
Well, at the moment, I'm training to be a private pilot.
No way! Really? What made you want to do that?
Well, I've always loved the idea of flying a plane, ever since I was a little girl.
Wow. Isn't it expensive?
Yeah, but it's worth it. It's an amazing experience. But what about you, Martin? What do you do for leisure?
Nothing nearly as exciting. I play ice hockey in my spare time. I'm captain of the college team. So at weekends we travel to games all over the state.
But that sounds fun. Do you enjoy leading the team?
Yeah, I do. Track 14.
Hi, Steve. What are you doing?
Well, I collect stamps with pictures of tropical birds on them, so I'm looking for more of those.
Oh, that's interesting. Which ones have you got so far?
I've got a 32-cent stamp with a picture of a cardinal honeyeater on it. It came out in 1998.
A cardinal honeyeater? Is that a bird? Can I see it?
Yeah, here. It's a tropical bird.
Oh, yes. It's beautiful. So which country is the stamp from?
The United States.
And how did you get it? Do you know someone in the States?
No, it's not like that. I buy stamps from other collectors. Look at this one. I bought it last week. It's a 25-cent stamp.
Oh, brilliant. It's got a parrot on it. When was it issued?
1967.
OK. And where's it from?
It's from Brazil.
Cool.
Track 15. Hi. Can I help you? Are you interested in climbing at all?
Hi, yeah. Actually, I've been thinking about joining a club for a while now. So, what do I have to do?
It's easy, really. I can fill in the form for you right now online, and then you can come to our first meeting next month.
OK, let's do that then.
Right. First of all, what's your name?
Andrew.
Andrew. And your family name?
Metcalf.
Metcalf. How do you spell that?
Metcalfe.
Metcalfe with an E.
Yes, that's right.
And your age? Are you over 18?
Yep, I'm 21.
And where do you live?
My address is 43A, Highbury Square, London, W1.
Thanks. And do you have a number where I can contact you?
Yes, my mobile is 07209 571 324.
And I have to ask you a couple more questions. Do you have any health problems?
No, nothing.
And a last question, have you ever climbed before?
Yes, I have, a bit.
Well, thanks very much. Track 16. Section 3. You will hear two students talking about university clubs and societies. First, in the exam, you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 1 to 4. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Hello, are you the person to ask about joining a club?
Yes, I am. What would you like to know?
Well, I'm interested in several things, but I'd like to know more about the different clubs and how much they cost. I'm looking for a small club that's not too expensive.
OK. Have a look at this table. You can see the names of the clubs, the fees, and the number of members. I'm afraid they aren't in any order. If you look at the top of the list, the first club is table tennis. That's one of our new clubs.
Oh, right. So the table tennis club costs £20. That's quite expensive.
Yes, it is a bit expensive. The cross-country cycling club is cheaper, though. Membership fees are only £15, but on the other hand, it's got 100 members.
The film and drama club costs a lot, doesn't it?
Yes, £50 is a lot, and that's probably why it only has 12 members. Is there any other club you think looks interesting? Look at the next one, street dance. Have you ever done any street dance?
No, I haven't really.
It's the cheapest. It only costs £5. Before you hear the next part of the conversation, in the exam you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 5 to 7. Track 17. Listen and answer questions 5 to 7. OK. Shall we start with your interests? What do you like doing best?
Well, I like photography. I've got a professional camera, so I take it quite seriously. But I can't really imagine belonging to a club to take photographs. I usually go on long walks on my own and take photos. So I like photography, but I wouldn't want to join a club to do it.
OK. So what else do you like doing? Running?
Oh no, not running. I like walking, but I hate running. I'm afraid the running club isn't for me, or the cycling club.
And film and drama?
No, it's far too expensive. But I do like yoga. I've practiced yoga on and off for years. How many members does the yoga club have?
It's always a small group. A lot of people sign up at the beginning of term, but they stop going after a few weeks. So they're left with a few regular members every year.
That sounds good. I think I'd like to join the yoga club. And what about the contemporary dance club? Is it expensive?
Contemporary dance? No, it's not expensive. £10 for the term. Do you like dance?
Well, I've never tried contemporary dance, but I do like jazz and tap dance. How often does the group meet?
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, in the exam, you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 8 to 10. Track 18. Listen and answer questions 8 to 10. So, can I have your full name, please?
Victoria Mandeville.
Mandavil?
No. Mandeville.
L-E. Thank you. And how old are you?
19.
And your address?
57, Bury Gardens, Atherton Park, Manchester, M46.
How do you spell Bury? B-E-R-R-Y?
No, it's B-U-R-Y.
Right, B-U-R-Y. And do you have a contact number?
Yes, my mobile is 07942 573 279.
07942 573 279.
Yes, that's right. Is that all?
One more thing. Do you have an email address? That is the end of section 1. In the exam, you will have half a minute to check your answers. Track 19. 1. We thought that young women would spend a lot on clothes and shoes, and that young men would buy more video games, mobile phones, and cars. 2. We found that although young women don't spend as much as men on eating out, they do spend a lot more on organic foods than young men. 3. In fact, people aged between 30 and 55 spend most of their money on furniture and kitchen equipment. People are usually improving their homes at that age, and household equipment is very expensive. Track 20. Their holidays start at the beginning of July. Listen again. Their holidays start at the beginning of July. Track 21.
When you start university, you'll probably find it's not all that easy to balance the time you spend on studying with the time you spend going out with your friends. In fact, one of the biggest problems you'll have is managing your time. Of course, it's perfectly understandable. I mean, in many cases, it's probably the first time you'll have lived away from home, so you'll have to do lots more things for yourself, like buying your own food, washing your clothes, and managing your own money. At the same time, there's no one there to tell you what time to come home at night, or what time to get up in the morning. On top of that, at university, you won't have as many hours of class as you did at school, and your tutors will expect you to study on your own a lot more. So you might feel you've got a lot of free time on your hands. So how do you deal with it? Well, to be honest, I don't think there's an easy answer, but I think it helps to go to all your classes, however tired you are. Print a copy of your timetable and put it on the wall in your bedroom. Actually, your university might even have a system for alerting you on your mobile when your lectures are. Apart from that, you could try not going out during the week and keeping your social life for the weekend. I'm not sure that's very easy, though. One thing I will say, though, is that at the end of the year, after your exams, you can really relax.
Track 22.
I started this new job a couple of weeks ago, and I'm having a lot of trouble with my work-life balance. In my last job, we had fixed hours. We had to be at the office at 9 on the dot, and we always finished at exactly 5. Any work we hadn't finished, we could just leave for the next day. But this new job's very different. I mean, in this job, we can come into the office any time between 8 and 10 in the morning. Then we can choose whether to have a lunch break or not. Then it gets a bit complicated. If we have a lunch break, we can leave between 4 and 6. If we don't have a lunch break, we can go home between 3 and 5. Okay, well, at first this system sounded really good, especially for me because I have young children. But the problem is that if we haven't finished our work, we have to finish it off at home. So it's actually very difficult to draw the line between work and home. For example, on Mondays, I can leave the children at school, go to the gym, and get into the office quite late. But I can't take a lunch break because I need to leave early to pick the children up from school. They come out at 4. And then I have to work from home in the evening to finish what I have to do.
Track 23.
If you look at this chart, you can see how we plan our projects. This one is a survey we're working on this year about where people like to shop. Okay. Well, we always start by having a team meeting. That's in the first column called tasks. So, in this team meeting, we decide what we need to do, who's going to do it, and when it's got to be ready, right? So, you can see here in the second column, we've got the start date of the project. That's the 23rd of January. That's the same day we have the team meeting. If you look down the tasks column, you can see that the first thing we have to do is write a draft questionnaire. You know, like an outline of the questions we want to ask. Then we have to check the questionnaire to make sure the questions are right. If you look at the lines in column 3, you can see the dates when we have to complete important tasks in the project. These are what we call milestones in the project. For example, When we've checked the questionnaire on the 25th of April, we'll have reached a milestone, and when we've completed the survey on the 30th of June, we'll have reached another milestone. On the 15th of August, when we finish entering the data on the database, we'll have finished the first phase of the project. The second phase of the project involves writing the report. We'll be doing that between the 15th of August and the 15th of September, and that's the deadline for the project to be handed to the client.
Track 24. Section 2. You will hear a human resources manager talking about her company's work-life balance policy. First, in the exam, you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 1 to 5. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
In our company, we believe that our employees are more productive, they work better if they're happy. Naturally, we have to make sure the company makes a profit, but at the same time, we need to think about the physical and mental health of our employees. We do understand that they aren't just working machines, so we have a policy of helping them find a fair balance between their work and their private lives, what we call a work-life balance. We do this in several ways. Firstly, we have a family-friendly policy, so parents can look after their children when they're very young. For example, sometimes they need to work flexible hours, times that aren't fixed. Other times, parents have to work part-time, and quite a lot work from home. Another example of our family-friendly policy is our generous maternity leave package. In our company, we allow women who've had a baby to take a whole year off work after the baby's born. And of course, while they're away, their jobs are protected.
Before you hear the next part of the talk, in the exam, you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 6 to 8. Track 25. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 8.
Because we want our employees to be happy, we carried out a survey recently to find out which working patterns are really most popular. In general, our staff prefer to work at the office. In fact, nearly half come in during regular office hours, from 9 to 5. Anyway, we also asked about part-time work, working from home, and another option, job sharing. Job sharing is a kind of part-time work where two people share the responsibilities for one full-time job. Anyway, we found that only 5% of our staff wanted to share a job, so it's not very popular on the whole. But when it comes to working part-time, we were surprised to find that 27% of our employees would actually prefer it. That's a very high number, really, over a quarter of the staff. And then it was interesting to see that quite a lot of our staff, 20% in fact, would like to work from home.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, in the exam you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 9 and 10. Track 26. Listen carefully and answer questions 9 and 10.
I'd like to give you an example of the kind of person who benefits most from our family-friendly policy. Sally is one of our assistants in accounting who has 2 small children. Sally's husband travels abroad a lot, so she has to look after the children on her own most of the time. Both the children go to a nursery early in the morning. So we've agreed that Sally can come in at 8 o'clock after she leaves the children. At lunchtime, Sally's sister picks the children up from the nursery. But she has to go to work herself at 3 o'clock. So Sally leaves the office at 2 to collect the children from her sisters. And she makes up the extra time by finishing her work at home.
That is the end of section 2. In the exam, you will have half a minute to check your answers. Track 27. Conversation A. Hey, Mick, have you ever been to Thailand?
Yeah, I was there last year. Why'd you ask?
Well, I'm thinking of doing a project on Asian food and was wondering whether Thai food was the same as Chinese.
Oh, right. Thai food's not exactly the same as Chinese, but they both have a really healthy diet with lots of vegetables. Some of the dishes are pretty hot and spicy, though.
Conversation B.
Hi, Tony. Do you have a moment?
Sure. What's it about?
Well, I'm researching types of homes across the world, and I thought I'd ask you where people live in Australia.
Sure. Which part of Australia are you thinking about? I mean, there are blocks of flats in most cities, the same as anywhere else in the world. Conversation C.
Hi, Barbara. How's your Japanese language project going?
It's great. I'm learning about the Japanese alphabet at the moment. And what about your project about China? How many languages do they speak?
Well, there's Mandarin Chinese and at least another 10 varieties of Chinese from different regions.
Wow, that's amazing.
Conversation D.
Amira, I'm doing a project on traditional clothing. Do you have any in the Emirates?
Oh yes, we do. The typical dress for women is called an abaya. It's basically a long black dress, but we decorate it with gold patterns around the sleeves and neck. It's usually made of a kind of silk. Look at this one here. What do you think?
Oh, I think it's lovely.
Track 28. I'm trying to find out if people from northern countries have the same attitudes to talking to strangers in public as people from southern countries.
OK, so what have you found out?
Well, I found out that in some countries it's more common to talk in public than in others. For example, people in the UK and Holland don't usually talk to people they don't know, but the Italians and the Spanish seem to be much more open. They chat to people on buses, in shops, in restaurants.
So, do you think that people from the south of Europe are friendlier than northern Europeans?
Well, it does look that way. Even in the same country. I mean, for example, in comparison with Italians from the north of Italy, the Italians in the south chat much more to each other in public.
It does sound interesting. Well, that's fine. I think you've found a good topic.
Track 29.
Hi, Barbara. Why don't you join our group? We're going to give a presentation about what we eat at each meal in our home countries.
Oh, great. I love finding out about other cultures. So, where do we start? Breakfast? In the UK, we have cereal, toast, eggs, and tea or coffee for breakfast. Have you got that, Mina?
Yes, but breakfast in India is completely different. We have a lot of different kinds of breakfast across India, but mostly we eat some type of bread with lentils.
Oh, is that right? In China, we have tea with noodles or rice and vegetables for breakfast. So, what do you have for lunch, Barbara?
Well, you know, in the UK, we don't usually have a big lunch. We usually just have a sandwich. But it's different in India, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. I don't like sandwiches at all. We have rice and vegetables for lunch in India.
Yeah, we have a cooked meal at lunchtime too. We usually have noodle soup and a main course.
We have our main meal in the evening in the UK as well. Quite often we have chicken, meat or fish with potatoes and vegetables.
Track 30.
Hi, Mina. Shall we have a look at the material for our presentation on marriage customs?
Yeah, sure. I've got a lot of information about India. How about you?
Yes. I've got material about marriage in the Emirates. Shall we get going? What about meeting? How do people in India meet in the first place?
In traditional Indian families, the parents used to arrange the marriage, and the couple used to meet for the first time when the boy visited the girl's house. But that's changed now.
Yeah, we used to have arranged marriages in the Emirates too. Did the groom have to give anything to the bride's family? I mean, did they give them a gift or money?
Well, in India, in the old days, the girl's family used to give the boy's family a gift, like money or jewelry, but it's not allowed anymore.
Wow, in my country, the groom still has to pay all the expenses. Have there been any changes in marriage customs in India in recent years?
Well, yes. I found an article about special websites for finding partners. It says that because so many young people from India study abroad these days, their families are using websites to find marriage partners for them.
Oh, okay. And where does the couple live when they get married?
That's another thing that's changing. In the past, the bride used to go to live with the family of the groom. But these days, more and more young couples are setting up their own homes independently. What about the Emirates?
Track 31. Section 3. You will hear two students discussing a project on international festivals with their tutor. First, in the exam, you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 1 and 2. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 and 2.
Good morning. Shall we start by looking at the topic of your project? So, what have you decided to research?
Well, we thought we'd compare festivals in different countries and see if any of them are similar.
Yeah, like the carnival celebrations in South America and the water festival in Thailand.
Okay. What exactly are you planning to study? The origins of the festivals? The types of celebration? People's attitudes towards the festivals?
We were planning to look at the origins of the festivals and the time of year they're celebrated. We're thinking of looking at the connection between the seasons in different countries and the actual festivals, and then looking for similarities between countries that are quite far apart.
Well, that sounds interesting. Did you say you've already started researching into the carnival?
Yes. We've already found a connection between the carnival and the seasons. For instance, some researchers say that a very long time ago in Europe, people used to put on colourful masks and costumes at the beginning of the year to celebrate the end of winter, and then they could get ready for spring. Before you hear the next part of the conversation, in the exam you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 3 to 5. Track 32. Listen carefully and answer questions 3 to 5.
Right. And then what happened?
Well, as the years went by, the purpose of the carnival changed and it became a religious festival. These days, there are big carnival celebrations in countries all across the world, like Brazil and India and Indonesia. But an interesting thing we discovered is that in some countries, people celebrate the carnival by throwing water at each other in the street. Well, we thought that obviously this is because carnival's celebrated at the hottest time of the year, just before the rainy season. So splashing people with water is a very good way of cooling them down.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, in the exam you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 6 to 10. Track 33. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Yes, that makes sense. Did you look into any other festivals?
Yes, we did. What we're planning to do is more research into water festivals. We found that in Asian countries, where there aren't any carnival celebrations, there are still festivals that involve people splashing each other with water. Actually, we found references to them in Burma, Thailand, Vietnam, China and Japan. but we also found a reference to a water festival in Mexico. So we thought we'd look into that a bit more and see if we can find any similarities between these countries. We realised that water is more than just a way of cooling people down in hot weather. It also has a lot of different religious meanings and purposes. For instance, we found that in some societies, water can mean life or wealth or just luck.
Yes, and another thing we found out is that these water festivals often celebrate the beginning of the new year, just like the original celebrations hundreds of years ago before the carnival. So, up to now, we found that the carnival and the seasons are linked by ancient traditions, and that water plays an important part in the celebrations.
That is the end of section 3. In the exam, you will have half a minute to check your answers. Track 34. I'm going to start this lecture by describing the structure of an offshore oil rig. Well, to be accurate, we should call it an oil platform. If you look at the diagram, you can see the top part of the platform floating on the surface of the water. The tall tower in the centre of the platform is called a derrick. That's D-E-R-R-I-C-K. The derrick is where the drilling machinery and lifting equipment is installed. Okay? Now, if you look about halfway down the diagram on the right, you can see a helicopter. It's parked on the helicopter pad. Helicopters are used mostly to transport employees to and from the platform when they have free time. Now, if you look underneath that, at the very bottom of the platform, you can see one of the 4 support towers. These support the rest of the platform. These metal structures are usually attached to the seabed by long cables. Right. Now, the last part of the platform I'm going to describe is on the other side, just above the level of the water. It's a crane. That's spelt C-R-A-N-E. Cranes are used everywhere in construction, but this one is specialist equipment for lifting heavy spare parts at sea. In fact, apart from the derrick, you can see 3 cranes in the diagram. Track 35.
Some experts believe that if we knew how to control the power of the sea, we could generate enough electricity for the whole world. But, in this talk, I'm going to focus on the UK and our capacity for generating electricity from wave and tidal energy. I'm going to look at how many megawatts we generated before 2008 and how many we expect to produce in 2014. So, if you'd like to look at the chart, you'll see that before 2008, our capacity was only 1 megawatt. But in 2008, when oil prices rose, there was an increased interest in marine power, and our capacity grew quite dramatically to 4 megawatts. Now, you might have expected this figure to rise consistently over the years, but, in fact, it dropped again in 2009 to only 2 megawatts. This was because oil prices fell again, so there was less interest in developing alternative power sources. But nowadays, the cost of oil production is going up again, and there's been a renewed interest in marine power. As a consequence, capacity has increased steadily since 2009, reaching 18 megawatts in 2012. This trend is expected to continue in the near future, reaching a total capacity of 50 megawatts in 2013 and 60 megawatts in 2014.
Track 36. Section 4. You will hear a lecture on deep-sea exploration. First, in the exam, you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 1 to 4. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Good evening. My talk this evening will cover 3 main themes. First, I'll outline a timeline of how deep-sea exploration vessels developed. Secondly, I'll describe the most recent of these, the Deep-Sea Challenger. And finally, I'll look at some of the benefits of this deep-sea research. OK, to start with, let's look at how underwater exploration vehicles have developed over the years. The first manned deep-sea exploration vessel was invented in the 1920s. It was called a bathysphere, better known as a diving bell. It was basically a round metal structure with windows with just enough room for 2 men to sit in. And it was lowered into the ocean on a cable. The first descent in the diving bell took place in 1930, and in 1934 it went down to a depth of nearly 1,000 metres, which was impressive for the time. The problem with the diving bell was that it had no power of its own, and there wasn't much room for the researchers to move around. So, the next development after the diving bell was the bathyscaphe, a small manned submarine invented in the 1940s. The difference between the two was that the bathyscaphe had its own power source, which allowed the scientists to investigate in the depths of the ocean more freely. A bathyscaphe called the Trieste reached a record depth of 10,000 metres in 1960. Since then, a new record has been set by James Cameron, who descended to a depth of 11,000 metres for the first time in 2012.
Before you hear the next part of the conversation, in the exam, you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 5 to 8. Track 37. Listen and answer questions 5 to 8.
So let's move on now to look at the submarine that took James Cameron so far down into the ocean. If you look at the drawing of the Challenger, you can see the pilot's chamber at the very bottom of the submarine. It's a very small section where the pilot sits and controls the sub and all the equipment on it. Now let's have a look at how the submarine is powered. Going up from the pilot's chamber, in the middle of the sub, on the right-hand side of the drawing, you can see a whole section covered in batteries. They provide the power source that takes the sub all the way to the bottom of the ocean and back up to the surface again. Next to that, there's another important part of the sub. You probably realise that there's no light at the bottom of the ocean, so the sub needs to take its own. If you look at the back of the sub, in the middle, just next to the batteries, you can see the panel of lights. They provide the light for filming and taking samples from the seabed. And one more part of the sub, which is important for navigation and to stop it spinning out of control, is the large fin at the back. You can see it at the back of the sub at the top of the drawing.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, in the exam you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 9 and 10. Track 38. Listen carefully and answer questions 9 and 10.
OK. To conclude my talk, I'm going to ask a couple of questions. First, what is the purpose of this deep-sea exploration? And second, is it worth the expense? I think one of the justifications for spending so much money on this kind of research is that it allows scientists to understand more about the surface of the Earth. For example, how it was formed and how it behaves. This could have important consequences for predicting earthquakes and saving lives through early warning systems. Another reason this type of research is considered valuable is that by exploring unknown parts of the ocean, we increase our knowledge of the availability of minerals for industry. And obviously, this could lead to huge commercial advantages. So, the answer is yes. In the long run, this kind of exploration can benefit both the ordinary population and industry.
That is the end of section 4. In the exam, you will have half a minute to check your answers. Track 39. 1.
Abdul studies every evening until 9.
2.
Thank goodness you're home before dark.
3.
Arabic is one of the most difficult languages to learn.
4.
Our classes start again in September.
5.
In many Asian countries, the diet is very healthy.
6.
Communication helps people from different cultures to understand each other.
Track 40. Practice exam. You will hear a number of different recordings and will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the questions and instructions, and you will have a chance to check your answers. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear a customer calling a travel agent to book a holiday. First, you will have some time to look at questions 1 to 3. You will see that there's an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation related to this will be played first.
Hello, Travelwide, can I help you?
Oh yes, good morning. I'm looking for a hotel for a long weekend.
The caller says that he is looking for a hotel for a long weekend. So the answer is C, a few days. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 3.
Hello, Travelwide, can I help you?
Oh yes, good morning. I'm looking for a hotel for a long weekend.
Okay, first of all, where would you like to stay? I mean, are you looking for a peaceful weekend in the country, a busy city break, or a relaxing time at the beach?
Well, I certainly want a quiet weekend. I work very hard, so I'd like to relax for a few days.
Right, so it would be country or beach. Which would you prefer?
The beach is very relaxing, but I think I'd rather go to the country this time.
Okay, that's fine. Let me have a look at country hotels. Would you like to stay at a spa hotel where you could swim, read, eat healthy food and have relaxing treatments? Or would you prefer a family hotel on a farm?
I must say I like the idea of a spa.
Well, that's great. Now, let's just look at our spa hotels. You definitely don't want the beach.
No, I'd like to go somewhere in the countryside, somewhere where I can go for walks.
Okay, then it won't be the Ocean Waves Resort. Farmhouse Getaways is a family-run hotel in the country, but it's not a spa. How does Sparkling Springs sound? It's a luxury spa hotel in the countryside with an indoor heated pool and views over the fields and woods nearby.
That sounds exactly what I'm looking for. Let's go for that.
Excellent.
Before you hear the next part of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 4 to 7. Track 41. Now listen and answer questions 4 to 7.
Now, if I can take some details, I can make the booking for you. Could I have your full name, please?
Yep. My name's William French.
William French. And your address?
Number 4, The Willows, Stanmarch, Norfolk, NE1 4SP.
The Willows. Sorry, how do you spell that?
WILLOWS. The Willows.
Thank you. And can I have a contact number for you?
Yes, my mobile's probably the best one. It's 07632 112254.
07632 112250.
No, it's 07632 112254.
Sorry, 54. And when would you like to go?
On the weekend of the 15th of June.
Fine. Checking in on the 15th of June. And when would you like to check out?
I'd like to stay until the night of Monday the 18th of June, so I'd be leaving on Tuesday the 19th.
Right. Check out on Tuesday the 19th of June. And how will you be paying?
By credit card. How much will it be?
Let me see. 4 nights at £90 per night is £360. Is that okay? It includes breakfast and dinner and a treatment a day.
Yes, that sounds fine. I'm looking forward to it.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 8 to 10. Track 42. Now listen and answer questions 8 to 10.
Would you like me to tell you how to get to the hotel once you're in the village? It's a bit difficult to find.
Oh, yes, please. I have maps on my mobile phone, but there isn't always a signal.
OK. Well, coming into the village from the motorway, which is in the east, the first building you see on your right is the church. It's right opposite the garden centre.
OK. The church is on my right and the garden centre on my left.
Yes. Just after that, you'll come to the railway crossing, and then you'll see the river on your left. After that on the right, you'll see the school. It's just before the bridge over the river.
So the school's before the bridge?
Yes, that's right. Now, just after the bridge, you'll see a turning on your left. Take that and follow the road through the fields. On your left, between the road and the river, you'll see a lot of vegetable gardens. Just keep going down the road to the end. It leads straight into the car park at the spa. You can't miss it. It's at the end of the road.
Thank you very much for your help.
My pleasure. I hope you have a lovely weekend.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Track 43, section 2. You will hear a talk by a tour guide. First, you will have some time to look at questions 11 to 13. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 13. Good morning. Welcome to the Science Museum. There's so much to do here. You could spend all day going from one exhibition to another. But if your time is limited, I'd suggest choosing maybe just one main exhibition. At the moment, I suggest that you don't miss our new exhibition of everyday inventions. It's amazing to see how objects we use in our daily lives, like paper clips, tea bags and light bulbs, were invented in the first place, and how they've developed over the years into such an essential part of our lives that we hardly ever notice them. You shouldn't miss it. The other thing I'd suggest if you don't have much time is a guided tour of the free exhibitions. These tours usually start on the hour, at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock and so on. They're quite short, only half an hour, so you could do a couple of tours in an afternoon if you wanted to. If you'd like to go on a tour, you should go to the entrance of the exhibition on the ground floor and wait for the guide there. Before you hear the next part of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 14 to 17. Track 44. Now listen and answer questions 14 to 17. Just to give you an idea of the range of exhibitions we have here at the museum, I'm going to tell you about the exhibitions and activities we have for visitors of different ages. First of all, for the little ones, we have a fascinating area called Shapes and Patterns, where they can play with objects and images and see how they form different patterns. It's really colourful and exciting. Kids love it. Then, at the other end of the scale, we have more complex exhibitions that appeal more to our older visitors. There's one about the history of aviation, how planes developed over the years. Older visitors may even be able to remember some of the earlier planes on display. Another exhibition that adults might particularly enjoy is the energy exhibition. It shows the historical development of different forms of energy in Britain and how it has powered industry over the centuries. And of course, we mustn't forget the teenagers. There are lots of exhibitions to interest them, but my favourite one is the one where visitors can find out more about how physics works. It's a fun exhibition with plenty of hands-on activities that explore how light and heat and chemicals work. I still go there myself now and then. It's brilliant. Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 18 to 20. Track 45. Now listen and answer questions 18 to 20. Most of our exhibitions are free, but you will need a ticket for some of the special ones, like the 3D film shows. So let me explain how you get a ticket online. Of course, you can do this directly at the ticket office, but if there's a long queue, you can book online on your mobile. So, go to our homepage and choose the Events button. Then, click on the film title. That'll take you to the next window. In the right-hand corner, you'll see a little calendar. Choose the date on the calendar and then go to the next window. There's a drop-down box there for you to choose the time and another one for the number of tickets. Careful on that page. There are different prices for adults and children. When you've done that, go to the final page and choose your payment method. That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Track 46, Section 3. You will hear 2 students and their tutor discussing a survey project. First, you will have some time to look at questions 21 to 23. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 23. So, what's the survey about, Tom?
It's about where students want to live and how they choose. Basically, their accommodation preferences. We've actually tried it out with a few students already.
OK, that sounds fine. So, to start with, how many questions have you got? 20?
Is that too many?
Yes, it is, really. People get fed up answering lots of questions and they stop thinking about their answers.
Right, so we need to think about that again. What do you think of the first 3 questions?
You want to know what affects students' choice of accommodation when they go to university?
Yes, we want to find out which has the most effect. The cost, the number of rooms in the house or flat, or the distance from campus.
And then we asked another question.
Oh, yes? What else did you want to find out?
Well, we wondered whether public transport was important. You know, not many students have cars, so it might be quite important for them to be near somewhere where they could catch a bus or train.
Yeah, that's a good question. Before you hear the next part of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 24 to 26. Track 47. Now listen and answer questions 24 to 26. Before you ask any more people, I've got a couple of suggestions for improving the questionnaire. First of all, I think you need to ask fewer questions. As I said, 20 is really too many. I'd cut it down to 10 if I were you.
OK, 10 questions only. And is there anything else you think we should do?
Well, yes. Some of the questions are actually quite complicated. I think you should make them clearer. I think they should be easier to understand.
And what do you think about asking more questions about cost?
No, I don't think you need any more about cost. But you could ask a couple more questions about the reasons for students' decisions.
So we should ask some more questions with why?
Yes, I think you'd get quite a lot more information if you did that.
Thank you.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Track 48. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
We've already got some results from our first questionnaire. Do you think we could use them?
I don't see why not. What have you found out so far?
Well, the number of rooms was only important for 16% of the people we asked. It looks like a lot of students are quite happy to share a room, and even fewer people were concerned about being near a bus stop. Only 10%, in fact.
I'm surprised about that. But what about the distance from the university?
Well, that was quite important. Around 20% of the students we asked wanted to be close to campus.
That makes sense. And what about the cost?
Yeah, as we expected, the cost was by far the most important factor. More than half the students were concerned with the cost, 54% to be exact.
Only 54%? I thought it would be closer to 80%. That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Track 49, Section 4. You will hear a lecture on bird migration. First, you will have some time to look at questions 31 to 34. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 34.
My lecture this evening will focus on the migration of birds. That is, how birds fly in big groups from different parts of the world at certain times of the year. In the first part of the lecture, I'll talk about the reasons why birds migrate, when they migrate, and which parts of the world they migrate from and to. To start with, why do birds migrate? Well, there are two main reasons. 1, they migrate to look for food, and 2, they travel to parts of the world that are more suitable for breeding. In fact, these reasons are closely linked. As you can imagine, when birds are breeding, they need extra food to feed their young. And in the spring, in the cooler climates of Europe, there is a lot of food for birds, especially insects. So generally, during the spring, birds fly up from the tropics, which are hot, to cooler climates in the north. They stay there for a few months to bring up their young. And then, when the weather in the north gets cold in the winter, they fly back to warmer climates in the south.
Before you hear the next part of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 35 to 37. Track 50. Now listen and answer questions 35 to 37.
Now I'd like to talk a bit about how global warming has affected bird migration. One of the effects of global warming has been to make the spring come earlier in the northern regions of the world. When spring comes early, the plants and insects that birds need to bring up their young are also available earlier. Research has shown that quite a lot of birds have started to migrate earlier because of higher temperatures. But unfortunately for some species, this hasn't been early enough. What I'm saying is that birds that are travelling a long way for breeding may arrive too late to find enough food to feed their young, and their population drops drastically. Scientists are currently researching more about this.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 38 to 40. Track 51. Now listen and answer questions 38 to 40.
Now, I thought I'd finish by just briefly describing a few different patterns of migration. Migration varies with the type of bird and the area they come from. For example, one kind of migration is partial migration. This means that some birds in a particular species will migrate and others won't. It usually depends on how the weather affects food supplies, and very often happens in the tropics. In another migratory pattern, a bird called an Arctic tern migrates the whole length of the globe, from the North Pole to the South. The Arctic tern travels between 12 and 15,000 kilometres each way when it migrates in a complete circle around the world. It's quite amazing. Right, and lastly, I'd like to mention a pattern which isn't nearly as spectacular, but is very interesting. And this is the way many birds migrate across North America. In this pattern, the birds fly northwards in the west of the country and then back south again in the east. So, if you imagine it, they're actually migrating in a circular pattern, like the hands of a clock, not in a straight line as we might think.
That is the end of the listening test. You now have some time to check your answers.